It's York County's morning show on Seacoast Oldies. Happy Wednesday. My name's Andy Austin. Here joined by an absolute legend, a man who's in the Boston Music Hall of Fame and has a show coming up at Johnathan's in Ogunquit on Friday. It's the Johnny A Trio, and I got the man joining me here on the program this morning. Welcome to the program, Johnny.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, doing great. What are you doing right now?
What am I doing right now? I actually was messing around with some recording gear after I got off the phone with the IRS. But it was a kind of a mistake on their half.
Oh, good.
So that's always good when they make the mistake.
And good for you for following up on that, because there are so many scams these days where you're like, oh, well, whatever, I'm just going to blow that off. And then it turns out you're sued and in jail for 20 years, and nobody wants that. Yeah. One of the most recent pieces of work that Johnny has put out is a cover of You Get to Hide Your Love Away, the Beatles classic. But why now? Why the Beatles, and why that song?
Well, what happened was during the lockdown, the pandemic, my trio, which will be performing up at Johnathan's this weekend, that consists of Marty Richards on drums, who's played with everybody from the Jay Giles Band to Joe Perry to Gary Burton to Duke Robillard, and Dean Cassell, who's currently with John Cafferty and previously with Sue Tedeschi and a bunch of other people. We had been performing, and we just had nothing to do, obviously, for all that time. So we decided to do some recording. And I had a project at the time called From A to Beatles, which was a reimagining of Beatles songs done instrumentally. And we had recorded 21 songs, and I never really quite finished the project as far as mixing and getting it out. I just started to get a little bit frustrated with the industry, the music industry, and how you distribute your music and what kind of money you can make from it. So I just shelved the project, and it wasn't until we started up again and started gigging live, and I went back and reviewed some of the material, and that was always one of my favorite John Lennon songs. And what happened was, it was when Jeff Beck passed away, who was my biggest guitar influence, I just decided to revisit that song in a style that maybe Jeff Beck would have approached it. And I finished the song. I released it last November. And since the music industry, like I said, financially is such a mess, I just decided to, any of the profits that came from the song, whether it be from downloads or from streaming, all the profits would go to the Greater Boston Food Bank. Anybody can get information about that at my website, johnnyaa.com.
Johnny A is my guest, and he's got a show with the Johnny A Trio coming up at Johnathan's in Ogunquit on Friday. We're talking about his cover of You Got to Hide Your Love Away, and I'm listening to it, and I always wonder how someone as accomplished as yourself picks a tone for a certain song. How did you pick the tone for the melody of that song?
Well, I think I really wanted to try to get a mournful vocal kind of quality to it.
Johnny A is our guest. He has the show Friday night at Johnathan's in Ogunquit. The world recently lost Bobby Whitlock, who I know you were very close with.
Yeah, Bobby and I kept in contact. We'd probably speak at least once a year or something like that, or every 6-7 months. I had the honor to work with him twice, actually. Once in 1979, we worked together when he was trying to put a band together and asked me to play for him. It was myself, him, Doug Clifford from Creedence Clearwater Revival, the drummer, and Duck Dunn from Booker T. And I was in the middle of trying to get my band at the time signed, and we had a lot of interest, so I kind of exited that project. But then when Bobby was putting something together in the early 90s, he called me and asked me if I would be musical director and put a band together for him, which I did. I remember the first rehearsal going in with him, and because that Layla album and Delaney and Bonnie, I was a big fan of all that stuff, and so to be able to, stand next to that guy in a rehearsal room on our stage and just hear the force of his Hammond organ and the vocal was just pretty astounding.
And, you mentioned being a music director, which is another facet of your career. Johnny A, by the way, is my guest this morning, and the show is Friday at Johnathan's. You can get tickets at jonathansogunquit.com. You were music director for Peter Wolf, too, and being a Boston guy, obviously with the lineage of the Jay Giles Band, he had gone in a pop direction for some of his solo stuff, but especially with Longline, he really came back to the blues. Can you tell me about that time working with Peter Wolf?
I started working with Peter, I think, in 93 up through 99, and he asked me to co-produce that album with him, which I did. It was a fantastic time, and it was a direction Peter was trying to change his direction and kind of imagine his identity musically.
Yeah, and it's well regarded, and I think set him on a second life of music too. You know, some of the stuff that he did after I think it all came back from the change that he made back to the blues with Longline. Johnny, you mentioned some of your bands and trying to get them together, and you had a lot of success with some of those bands locally, especially with WBCN. And even though we're a Maine radio station, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, we all play together, and we remember an iconic radio station like that. You had several interactions with some of the charts and the contest and Battle of the Bands and the Rumble and stuff like that. What was that culture like back in the 70s and 80s?
Well, I started playing the clubs in Boston probably around 1975. The music scene in Boston was just one of the best music scenes in the country. It was just, you had Van Morrison was living here at the time. You had the Taylors, James and Kate, and, Carly Simon was on the island, and Van Morrison was here for a while, and then you had all the blues bands like Caldwell Winfield and just all the jazz stuff with Berkeley and Paul's Mall and Jazz Workshop. It was just an amazing time, and the drinking age at that time was 18 years old. So the clubs were mobbed, and typically, like, you'd play the Rathskeller, or the Rat, as people would call it, in Kenmore Square, and the bands would play 4 nights. You'd play Thursday through Sunday, and it would be packed every night.
Johnny A is the guest, and we mentioned a lot of the guitar work and some of the bands that he's been in. Some of your best work or some of your most well-known work, like Sometime Tuesday Morning, isn't available on streaming. Was that your call or the label you were working with at the time?
Well, that's my delinquency in getting that stuff back up there. But originally I put that record out independently. And then I got picked up by Steve Vai's label, and it was distributed by Sony. And I subsequently signed a record deal with him and put out my second album, Get Inside. And so he put out all the stuff digitally, their company, Favored Nations. And when I left the label and I got my records back, there was a little bit of legal entanglements going on. And in that time, I put out my live CD, DVD, and then my 2014 record, Driven. And it took a long time for me to get them to take them off all digital platforms from the label, because the label would be getting credit for it and getting paid for it, and I wasn't. So it's really been my own delinquency not to get them reloaded up on Apple and Spotify, which I will do.
Yeah, please do. I mean, it's such a great mood record. You mentioned Driven, and there's a song on there, and there's definitely a Jeff Beck influence, but I also hear Billy Gibbons from A Dark Place. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Yeah, well, that was, it's funny you picked that up, because I played all the instruments on that album. I was going for kind of a ZZ Top-ish, not like a real rip-off of ZZ Top or Billy, but it was definitely shadowed in my musical mind there that I was going for that kind of vibe, that Billy's type of tone.
Johnny A's been our guest for the show at Johnathan's, which we actually really haven't talked too much about the trio and the show coming up on Friday. With all the things that we've talked about this morning, if someone's just hearing this message for the first time and learning about you, what can people expect on Friday?
Well, I think the trio is a good kind of introduction to the variety of musicalities that I try to employ. I mean, I kind of look at it like the show is, at one point I had it billed as the blues, the Beatles, and beyond. And, we'll do a lot of bluesy type stuff. We'll do interpretations instrumentally of some of the Beatles stuff that I do. And the beyond stuff is some of my original music. I've just recently started singing again, so there's actually some vocals.
Oh, really?
Within the set. Yeah,
I
never sing in the old days.
I never knew you as a singer. I've always known you as an instrumentalist. So I was going to ask the question, And thanks for opening the door because, you don't want to be, I wouldn't say insulting, but like you don't want to ask a rookie question of like, Johnny, why don't you sing?
That's a good question. I have a real answer for that. In the old days, I did used to sing, and when I was working with Peter Wolf, we were playing, I think, the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, and it was in the winter, and I got a super, super bad case of laryngitis and a bronchial infection. I lost my voice for like 3 weeks. I literally couldn't even speak. And when my voice came back, I didn't have the middle register of a male singing voice. I still had a low resonance. I could sing low, and I still had a high falsetto, but that whole middle range, the meat and potatoes of a male vocal, was not there for the longest time. And it's only recently that I've tried to develop a style in which my range will work. And I've been enjoying it, and I've been getting good response from the fact that I'm singing again. So,
well, now I'm glad I asked because I got to learn something cool. Johnny A's been our guest this morning. The show is Friday night. Johnny A Trio at Johnathan's in Ogunquit. Always a fantastic venue. And thank you so much for being generous with your time and your stories this morning.
My pleasure, and thank you for supporting the show, and I appreciate it and hope to see a bunch of people up there.